Hello and welcome to SNHell. My name is Keith. With me as always is my good buddy Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Keith, you're my good buddy, too.
Yay. I figured after all this time, I assumed good buddy status.
Absolutely. You may assume away.
This episode, it's a short episode. We think it's going to be short. It's the end of season 2, and we're just recapping tonight our favorite musical performances from season 2.
You know how I feel about the music.
I do, and it weighs heavier on you than it does me. Like, I do imagine you sometimes are up late at night, angry at booking.
You know what it is? It's because when I was growing up and watching the show, like in those developmental years, I saw such hot acts. So for the, interest of full disclosure, I am 43 years of age. So when I'm watching this, my developmental years are the 90s. And the 90s had some very cutting edge musical guests that I thought really opened my mind to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I started to notice that going forward. So because it made such an early impression on me, now that we're in a retrospective mode, you're damn right that I'm very attuned to it because it had such an impact on my youth.
Yeah, I first saw Pearl Jam on Saturday Night Live, Sharon Stone episode.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, Sharon Stone.
Yeah.
Jeez, I can't wait for that one.
And that's one of 3 episodes I had on a tape. It was Jason Priestley, Sharon Stone, and Joe Pesci. So those 3, when we get there, some of them sketches I'm sure I know off by heart.
I'm looking forward to these years.
We're talking tonight our top 5 musical guests from season 2. Matt, who's your number 5?
My number 5 is Boz Scaggs. And as much as everybody will roll their eyes and laugh at Boz Scaggs, I think it's important to mention about Boz Scaggs that this was an unexpected treat. And one of the things I like most about Saturday Night Live is that they serve unexpected treats on a fairly regular basis, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like the nice little surprises. I am not a big Boz Scaggs guy. I don't own a single album. But when this comes out and starts to shimmy, man, I was into it. I did not expect to be into it. And I think that's what really got me with Boz Scaggs is I did not expect to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So it really caught me off guard with its energy. And there was a lot of energy. And, part of me was like, why wasn't Boz Scaggs bigger? And then I, look at more Boz Scaggs and I see why. But that's neither here nor there. Magic on this night.
My number 5 is the Kinks. Now, I really enjoyed how the Kinks did it. They did a medley of their, 4 biggies, and then they went on to do their new one in their second set. But I know Christine and I were both big on that performance. That was from the Steve Martin episode. I know you weren't as big yourself, Matt, but I think you appreciated our appreciation for what they did and how they did it.
I did, and I just like the Kinks. Ray Davis he's a brilliant songwriter, and so it's hard for me to kick the Kinks because the Kinks are and Ray is just such a legend. One of my favorite songs is "I Go to Sleep." Do you know that one?
I do, yes.
Sleep. I can imagine that you're there with me, and he wrote that, and I think he's just a brilliant songwriter. So. You know what? I wasn't hot on the performance. I really thought it was, personally, of course, I thought it was a little schmaltzy as far as the greatest hits performance goes and that the new track wasn't hot. But, I still know that the Kinks are good.
Yeah.
That's just an objective fact. The Kinks are cool.
Number 4, my friend.
My number 4 was Tom Waits. I thought Tom Waits did an excellent job. I'm not super familiar with Tom Waits outside of his acting in Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was one of my favorite films. And my second familiarity with Tom Waits is I'm pretty sure every girl I've ever dated has been a Tom Waits fan. Like, oh, Tom Waits, you gotta listen to Tom Waits. Let's listen to Tom Waits. And it just seems to be a thing with the girls that I date. And maybe it says something about my taste in women, but nevertheless, I could never get into it until I saw him on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I got it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not texting any of these girls, but I got it when I saw him perform. It was, I forget the name of the song, to be honest.
Eggs and Sausage, something like that.
There it is. Yeah. And I just thought he did such a great job and such an interesting presentation and character himself.
Yeah.
That, it definitely got me.
Great performance. Didn't make my top 5, but I do agree it was very enjoyable. Number 4 for me is Frank Zappa, and I know he's got a special place in your heart. I really enjoyed this performance. It was different, both musically and visual presentation. It probably should be higher on my list, but I was just maybe slightly more blown away by some other folks.
So the performance that evening, and I mean, I'll say more about Frank Zappa, but he did 3. He did I'm the Slime, Purple Lagoon, and Peaches on Regalia. What was your favorite? Do you remember?
I Am the Slime.
That was the one with the cool video effects and Don Pardo.
Yeah, Purple Lagoon's the one that Belushi came out for.
Yeah, and it's much more musically complex. I was very surprised that he did the Purple Lagoon, considering its complexity. I thought he'd do something a little more TV friendly. Anybody that hears me say that well, you would say that you don't really know about Frank Zappa if you think that he's going to do something TV friendly. But you know what? More on that when he hosts.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your number 3?
Chuck Berry.
Nice.
My thoughts about Chuck Berry is that it's what I wanted the Kinks to be. It was a hot, greatest hits style performance, but with I thought the Kinks phoned it in a little bit, to be honest, and I thought Chuck was out there playing very Desi Arnaz style, like this might be the last gig I play of my life. Let me have fun with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a huge Chuck Berry fan, and I think that actually worked against him for this one, because I have seen some, quite a bit of Chuck Berry over the years, and this was par for the course Chuck Berry. Not that it wasn't good or bad, it was just anytime you see Chuck Berry, that's how he's performing, so I think that hurt him for me.
Sure.
My number 3 was an understated group. I don't think they got top billing that night, but it was Stuff. And they played they were the background band for Joe Cocker, with the Joe Cocker Belushi Feeling All Right. And then they went on to do one of their own pieces. I was really blown away. This was a group of musicians who were basically studio guys, but people loved seeing them perform live as well. They had matching t-shirts. They were just a great band. Really loved Stuff that night.
I really enjoyed Stuff too. While they didn't make my list, I certainly acknowledged their prowess, and I enjoyed them when they were on. The big thing with me is that they came off to me a bit like a backing band. Yeah, they're perfectly competent, they're obvious professionals, and it sounded great. But not to sound like a record exec, but I didn't hear a hit.
Yeah. Number 2, Matt.
Not to tip our hand to the thousands, but I'd like to discuss my second and my first at the same time.
Well, do you want my number 2 then? And then you can do your 1 and 2 together.
Yeah.
Well, my number 2 is, you've mentioned him, Boz Scaggs. And I'm doubling down on what you said, my friend. Boz Scaggs, I didn't expect anything. Even when he walked out, here's this Alex Jones looking fella. But he blew me away. And Boz Scaggs has entered my not my record, but my playlists. I was just absolutely blown away. Even after our recording, I was only sort of lukewarm on him. But since then, I've really become a fan and just enjoy everything that I get to hear from him. And it's interesting with Boz Scaggs in this sense. Like I said, the first time I saw Pearl Jam was Saturday Night Live. With Scaggs here, it's like, in a way, this is what late night TV should be. I don't know who this person is. Now I'm a fan of this person. And Scaggs and company, some of them being the Saturday Night Live band members as well, really accomplished that. So it was quite good, and I was really impressed.
That's exactly how I felt. And while I arranged, of course, my selections differently, that I'm tickled that you put Boz Scaggs so high.
Yeah.
Ahead of Frank Zappa, I think you're a crazy person, but that's neither here nor there. The element of surprise really lended him some major points, and it was just so much fun. And that's what we're watching for. It's the late night vibe, and I feel like that was captured.
And the other element too is, like, I watch most episodes 3 times minimum. And every time I see it, I enjoy it more. So yeah, big fan of the performances that Scaggs gave. Your number 2 and number 1, Matt. I know where you're going with this.
My 2 favorite performances of the season were Santana and Zappa, and the reason why I put Frank Zappa at number 2 and Santana at number 1 is that first of all, I am so excessively familiar with Frank Zappa. I have heard him perform these songs in several different venues and with different bands. And yeah, I really liked the band that Frank brought to SNL. And I thought it was, what he did with I'm the Slime, I thought was genius. And they had not tried that yet with SNL. It was really a performance on SNL musically that really set a bar. Like, you don't just have to stand there in front of a microphone and do your thing like a musician. You can do interesting, wild things. But what I really wanted from Frank Zappa that night was what Santana actually gave me. And it was a really tight band with a guitar player leader that featured a smooth vocalist. And like any other situation, Frank Zappa has his counterpart to this. Like, he has his Napoleon Murphy Brock to his Santana. And it is just, I know Frank too well in the sense that he's done it in such better variations before. It's funny because Zappa actually has a song called Variations on the Carlos Santana chord progression. It's a guitar solo, and of course it's very Santana. He does a Santana mock-up song, if you will. Anyway, I digress. I could talk about it all night. Santana gave me what I was kind of looking for in Zappa. So interesting, and like I wanted to see where it went. And yeah, maybe it's because I knew where Zappa went, or maybe it's because this wasn't my favorite band for these particular performances. And yeah, Zappa's my guy. He's my favorite rock and roll musician. But objectively, looking at Santana and Zappa, what I really would have loved from Zappa is what Santana gave me. And I hope that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Very similar, like with me and Chuck Berry. It's like, I kind of know Chuck Berry's staple performance, and that was kind of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my familiarity with Berry actually hurt him.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening with me here with Zappa. Is I know what year it is. I know exactly what he's up to because I'm a bit of a super fan, as much as I hate the term. But I know what's going on with him at the time, and I know who his band is at the time. I know the kind of shows he's doing at this point in the mid late 70s, and this is just. And, he killed it, and I loved it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say I didn't like it, because I absolutely did. But holy shit, man, Santana blew me away in a way that Frank Zappa does do on record that Santana has never done on record. But we're talking about Saturday Night Live. It's like MasterChef, I got to judge what you put on the plate in front of me.
And my number one, oddly enough, your number one didn't even make my list, Santana. And my number one didn't make your list. And my number one is the band. Tremendous band, a lot of history for me. They did a couple of their hits. Everyone got their chance to showcase and shine. And it's so close to the end of the line for them with The Last Waltz not too far out. This was a historic performance for me, as much as it was just a really solid Saturday Night Live performance. I don't know. I loved it. And this is one where my familiarity with the group actually helps them a lot, because I know where they were at. And this was a big one to see. And I just thought it was a tremendous performance all around.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting to me to hear you say that, and I don't like the band, and I never have. I've never picked up an album. I've never been interested in, and I mean, this sounds especially harsh, but I've never been really interested in anything they've ever done, and that did not change with their Saturday Night Live performance. I'm not trying to kick you or our valued third chair Mark. I just really find the band boring, and that's it's really tough for me to overcome what, in my perception only, of course, is just a lack of versatility. But those are just my 2 cents, man. I don't mean to shit on your number one.
So just to recap,
you bet. My number 5 is Boz Scaggs. My number 4 is Mr. Tom Waits. My number 3, the legend Chuck Berry. My number 2, my favorite, Frank Zappa. But my number 1 is the what I kind of wanted from Frank Zappa in Carlos Santana.
And for me, my number 5, the Kinks. Number 4, Zappa. Number 3, Stuff. Number 2, Skaggs. And number 1, the band. I think they're both solid lists. Certainly, I wouldn't expect everyone to have that exact same lineup. I know there's at least one person who's listened to us that will definitely have Kinky Friedman on his list. But yeah, so that's where we're at. Let us know where you're at in the comments if you're so inclined.
And you know what? If it's Leo Sayer, save it.
Yeah, I do like long, tall glasses for some bizarre reason. But yeah, Leo was not our thing. So that's our top 5 musical guests from season 2. We'll be back, or we're already back, with some other lists coming up. And pretty soon, Matt, we're jumping into season 3.
I can't wait, man.
All right, so thank you very much. And we're having lots of fun listing things here in SNHell.